My city clerk says we have 5:58. I have to wait the 2 minutes. Great opportunity to fill out those public comment cards.
I said, I turn that off.
Well, I have 6 o'clock. I will call this meeting to order with the caveat that it would not have started on time if Commander Fry had not come up here and killed the spider that was trying to attack me. So I appreciate that, Commander. Thank you. And with that, Vice Mayor Schaefer, will you lead us in the pledge, please?
Please join me.
Next item, please.
Roll call, Councilmember Bruins,
Present.
Councilmember Daniels, Councilmember Miller,
Here.
Vice Mayor Schaefer,
Here.
and Mayor Middleton.
Here.
Tonight's meeting of the Citrus Heights City Council is cablecast live on Metro Cable 14, the local government affairs channel on the Comcast Consolidated Communications and AT&T Uverse cable systems. This meeting is closed captioned and live streamed at citrusheights.net. Tonight's meeting replays on Monday, September 26th at 9 a.m. on Channel 14. And this meeting can also be viewed on the city's YouTube channel.
Item, please.
Next item is approval of agenda.
Approval.
Motion by Daniels,
Second.
second by Miller. All those in favor?
Aye.
So moved. Next item, please.
Next item is public comment, and members of the public may address the council on any agenda item of interest to the public and within the council's purview, or on any agenda item before or during the council's consideration of the item. Speakers will be limited to 3 minutes each. If you wish to address this council during the meeting, please either complete a speaker identification sheet and give it to myself. If participating via Zoom, use the raise hand function or *9 from a telephone to indicate your desire to speak. When your name is called, I will allow you to unmute your microphone to speak.
We have any speakers online?
I do not see any raised hands.
I have 2 speaker cards. One is for item 15, which I'll hold, but if Ken Olson will come up to the podium, please.
Hi, everybody. I'm new, so be gentle.
We're all friends here.
Okay, good. I know you are. I respect everything you guys do. I didn't know I was gonna be called first. I just have a few questions, nothing to rant or be tangent about. I just, I live in Citrus Heights, and there's a problem with the homelessness, we all know. And I have a grandson and a granddaughter on the way, and my grandson asked me why people are sleeping on the streets. And I don't know what to tell him. Do any of you? Okay. They're breaking into my cars, they're breaking my neighbor's cars. I'm a military brat, by the way. My dad's right here, 20 years service, and McClellan Air Force Base, you name it. I've been all over Europe. Europe has the same problem with homelessness. He owns a home, pays taxes, and I want to know, why can't we do something about, I know it's not your fault at all. But how about Citrus Heights? Let's start with Citrus Heights. Why can't we do something about Citrus Heights? Did I stop there or keep going? Oh, okay. Am I being recorded?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
You're on TV.
There's a problem with the homeless in my neighborhood. I lived here in the 70s, military brat, and I came back in the 80s, and I've seen a change in this neighborhood that I can't explain to anybody. You know, I do a lot of outreach programs and stuff like that, and it's getting to the point where, you know, it's almost like feeding the animals. You know, it breaks my heart, and I would like to start with Citrus Heights to do something about this situation. You know, I'm getting a little choked up, sorry. I would like to see something happen, at least in Citrus Heights, you know, I mean, I played baseball here in the 70s and 80s, you know, and I don't want to see my grandkids grow up with this problem, you know, and we can at least start with Citrus Heights, and I'd be grateful for that. And Ken.
Can I ask the city manager to just, the Reader's Digest version of the programs that we're just now really going to kick in right now, literally. And it's going to, I think, cause a noticeable difference in what you see in Citrus Heights. And so
Yeah.
I'm going to ask the city manager just to comment on those two things.
Yeah.
And hopefully that gives you some hope as we move
Well,
forward.
if you don't have hope, you have nothing.
Yeah.
I understand.
Thank you, Councilmember Daniels, and good evening, Mr. Olson.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming in tonight. The comments that you have, we've heard that throughout the community. These are things that our council is concerned about, as well as our staff team. And our council adopted a focus area work plan. And one of the key items in that is measures to address blight and homelessness and issues related to folks that are experiencing homelessness. So within that, we have a beautification crew that's actually going to be coming online next month. It's going to be a 2-person maintenance worker crew that has a 16-foot stake bed pickup that's going to be dealing with a lot of the litter and blight that you see in and around the city. We have a chronic nuisance abatement program that we're establishing. We're also working a lot with jurisdictional partners like Caltrans. We just had a major cleanup at the interchange. So hear you, and I know our council hears you, and I'm happy to provide the focus area work plan and get your comments on it. And you could, you know, see what we're doing and hear what's on your mind relative to that. We can definitely connect you with some of our team members here at the meeting tonight.
Okay, well, I appreciate your comments, and you know, like I said, I haven't seen a lot happen. I do a lot of outreach, and it's getting worse. And where do we start? How about Citrus Heights?
I hear you. And we have a navigator that's also, I left that part out. We've been making a lot of contact with individuals and seeing what we can do to try to get people into some housing as well. So comprehensive path here that we're hoping does make a difference that you and the community will see in time, but happy to share that with you.
Okay,
And usually council does not interact during public comment, but I will allow.
Yeah, we're here to receive but not give. But I just want to,
understand.
we're here to hear your public comment, but not
Okay.
necessarily are we allowed to respond.
Oh, I understand.
But I'm going to, with the mayor's permission, just say, if you have a specific problem area,
Yes, Antelope and
Please-
80.
and pardon me,
Antelope and 80.
well, there's been, it was a
And
major,
I have called the police department,
Right.
the non-emergency number.
literally in the last 2 days, there's been a major cleanup there. Might want to drive by
Yeah,
it.
well, they come right back.
Okay, well, we're
But see,
doing,
what I heard is that if they pitch tents, they can kick them out, but if you pitch a tarp or a tarp, they can't.
I don't know that that's necessarily true. What I was going to say to you, though, if you,
Well, I have,
sir, just-
my
So-
cousin works for the city of Sacramento. He cleans up the parks and works for, who does he work for?
Mr. Olson, I would strongly,
very much for your comments. We hear you.
yes, and I
Okay,
strongly
I
encourage
didn't
you
mean
to
I didn't
interact
mean
with the
to
city
interrupt. I'm
manager.
sorry. Okay,
No, no worries.
well, it's Okay.
Thank you for your
time.
comments.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm surprised I was first.
Thank you for your service.
Seeing no other public comment, next item, please.
Next item is presentation number 4, presentation introducing the book Becoming the City of Citrus Heights, The History of a Unique Incorporation.
I'm Bill Van Duker for the record. Good evening, Mayor Middleton and council members and staff. Tonight is the culmination of several years of work, and frankly, I'm delighted that it's behind us. As I have aged, as we all do, I became concerned that the record of our 12-year battle to incorporate the city of Citrus Heights was likely to fade away and become lost. A couple of dated PowerPoint presentations, bags and paper cartons of disorganized material was not a particularly good legacy for me to leave. The city archivist, Tina Stern, and the historian Larry Fritz have done a great job of collecting and indexing material, but I had a bunch of it just in boxes and bags and things. When the city approved the grant to write a book, I was relieved. I had a vision of a chronological setting forth of the facts. Miranda Culp, who actually authored the book, had a broader vision. She located and interviewed people that were definitely not on my list of persons who deserved space in the book. Wendell Phillips, the president of the Sacramento Deputy Sheriff's Association, is an example. He was absolutely relentless and vehement in his opposition to our incorporation. You will find that interview that Miranda had with him quite interesting. Another is Baxter Culver, the lobbyist for the county of Sacramento, who made a number of attempts, some of them successful, at the legislature to thwart our efforts. His analysis of the economics of incorporation at that time is very insightful, and I learned a lot in reading his interview. He may be correct that incorporation might have failed if Prop 13 hadn't passed, because at that time the city council could raise taxes, and after Prop 13, you can't raise taxes without a vote of the people. And the section that highlighted the experience of Patrick Borchers, who defended us in court all the way to the US Supreme Court, is one of the highlights for me. Patrick was arguing his first case before the California Supreme Court. He was a 30-year-old solo attorney against a battery of gray suits, most of which were 15 years older and far more experienced. But Patrick hit a home run, and some of the opposing attorneys acknowledged this to him after the arguments and long before the decision was handed down. That narrative is a highlight in the book for me. I have a couple more comments, but I'd like to introduce Miranda Culp and let her speak at this time.
Greetings, Mayor Middleton, City Council, and residents of Citrus Heights. When Bill approached me to write this story, I was frankly a little intimidated. I had no background in city planning, and I assumed it would be a dry research project. But anywhere there are humans, there is drama. I found myself laughing out loud at the shenanigans and deeply moved by the grit that the members of CHIP demonstrated throughout the cityhood battle. In other words, there were a lot of surprises and discoveries. Not only did I educate myself about the way that local government works, but I also had to unpack some of my own assumptions about politics. If there's one thing that I want the people of Citrus Heights to understand, it's that their city exists because people from opposite sides of the spectrum came together around a very basic democratic principle. This willingness to unify around a common goal is in short supply these days. at a time when we really need it most. I hope this spirit of collaboration continues to permeate your decisions, that we will all take a page from the Citrus Heights playbook. After all, you paid for it. I'd like to thank Tina Stern and Larry Fritz for their patient explorations, their vigorous fact-checking, their unwaning enthusiasm. I'd also like to thank Haley Reed Hildebrand for being my liaison with the City Hall and for championing this project from beginning to end. I'd like to thank Chris and Andrew Van Duker for all the design and formatting expertise and for not rolling their eyes at my very basic questions about printing. But above all, I'd like to express my sincerest appreciation for Bill Van Duker. You took a chance on me and guided me and occasionally reined me in. I don't have to tell anyone in this room that your efforts and intelligence helped the city come into being. And you and Janie's generous gift of the printed copies during a paper shortage should not go unmentioned. Thank you for making me a part of the Citrus Heights story. It's been a pleasure and an honor. Thank you.
Thank you, Miranda. Now I want to preach a little bit.
Turn his mic off.
You can step out, Jack. When we first incorporated, people would stop me in the stores and on the sidewalk and ask if I was pleased with the new city. Without exception, my reply was that the city had exceeded my wildest dreams. But as time passes, fewer and fewer people remember what it was like before. If we had remained unincorporated, we would have no community center, no police department or police station, no city hall, no Auburn Boulevard revitalization, probably no Sunrise Marketplace, or any of the hundreds of other things that the city has accomplished in the last 25 years. We would be represented by part of one supervisor at the county, and we would have no place on the regional boards like RT, SACOG, Air Quality, Regional SAN, and the other agencies where we now have a seat at the table. The county used to accuse us of wanting to withdraw from the county when we were in the incorporation effort, and my response to that was, no, we want a seat at the table at all of these agencies. I'm concerned about the future. At the 25-year mark, I feel we are at crossroads. We can reach for new goals, take new risks, and we can dare to be different and better. Or we can settle back and take short-term gains like cutting budgets, for example, at the expense of investing in the future and going forward to greatness. I hope we shoot for the stars. 37 years ago, we set out on a quest to become a city. 37 years ago. One of my favorite authors has a character that says, the most important thing about a quest is not in finding what you went looking for, but in finding what you never could have imagined before you ventured forth. And I could never have imagined when we started this process what we have today. My hope for the city going forward is to dream big, act boldly, and make Citrus Heights the shining city on the hill. Thank you for your support and the time tonight. End of sermon, Jack.
Before you sit down,
Yeah.
folks.
Oh, yeah, we have
want to,
comments.
we want to respond. Get off that easily. Well, first of all, Bill, I want to thank you for taking this on and for having the vision to do this book and for finding Miranda. You are now an official part of our community, Miranda, and I want to thank you for your good work. I had the privilege of reading one of the first manuscripts and making some editorial comment and so forth. And I haven't read it since, so I can't wait to read the book. But it is a magnificent project and historical artifact that I think we should have in our schools. I think our kids need to know. We should make available to people that weren't there at the time, you know, that just accept the life that they are provided at this time. I also want to just acknowledge a couple people that are in the audience. One, firstly, is Congressman Doug Ossie, who is very shyly sitting in the back, but he was part of our effort too. And he was president of Citrus Heights Incorporation Project, or CHIP at that time, which relieved former supervisor Roberta McGlashan, who's also shyly sitting in the back seat there, so that she could run and be elected to the very first city council. Those two people were very much an integral part of our effort, along with many others that have since, many have passed away, others have passed on, live in other communities. But I think this is the epitome of a grassroots effort where ordinary people came together and to achieve an extraordinary goal. And just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for allowing me to be part of it and for just taking this on and historically putting down on paper so that we will have this for all posterity. Thank you for giving us your gift of writing, Miranda. And thank you, Bill.
Jeannie Bruins and I used to joke that during the heart of the process, when we were battling so much, I spent more time with Jeannie than I did with my wife.
It's probably true. Although
Well, Bill, you and I haven't seen eye to eye on a lot of things, but I will say that this is what you've done for this city and what Supervisor McGlashan and Congressman Ossie and Gene Duncan and so many people, the sacrifices that you made really made a tremendous difference to people that sort of take the city for granted. I moved here in 1989. So it was before the city was a city. And when I heard about the incorporation project, I was excited about it. Wasn't terribly involved in the political side of it, but I was excited that, hey, we're going to have our own self-control. And thank you for giving that to us, to all of you.
Miranda and Bill, I'd also like to thank you for this book, Preserving Our Unique Incorporation History. I can't wait to read it. Don't tell me how it ends. Please.
Mr. Daniels.
Yeah, thank you very much. I really appreciated Jeannie's comments, especially. I think they're really right on. I want to really thank Miranda for doing this, giving this gift to our city and folks. And I only got to look at it a little bit real quick, but I think there are going to be people picking this book up for years when they start thinking about, you know, do we want to become a city and what does it take? And oh my God, look what these guys went through and they persevered and they did it. So I think you put together something really special here. So thank you. I want to thank the Godfather for being here. And I don't know what Councilman Shaver's talking about, because I've always been your favorite council member. So I want to thank you so deeply from the bottom of my heart for what you did, what you've done, and what you continue to do. We're not here but for you. And then I also want to extend that to Jack Duncan, to former Congressman Doug Ossie, to former Supervisor, Mayor, and Council Member Roberta McGlashan. You know, we should have a housing development that goes up that has these names for streets. And so keep that in mind next time around. But if not for these people, we don't exist today. And Citrus Heights is not a better place. And so just thank you to all of you. And I know there's others too. And so please forgive me for not mentioning other names, because there were other people that were tremendously involved in this too. But, you know, if not for these great people great people, we would not exist today. We are a success. And we're that because not only because we became a city, but because the people that did that a long time ago and put us on the right path and put us on the right culture of becoming the kind of city we are today. And that's why we still thrive no matter what. We'll continue to thrive. And thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Thank you, Brett.
All right, one more. When we came to Citrus Heights, my family and I, the first thing I did was figure out how to get involved. And at your insistence, Bill, I got involved with the Chamber Leadership Program. And that's where I heard the story from Ms. Bruin's own mouth about how we incorporated. And I did a lot of research and I talked and I came back to you and I said, well, how can I become more involved? How can I learn more? And you told me you gave me a list of people. It's like 25 people. He said, if you really are serious about this, go talk to these folks and understand what our community is about so that you can be able to participate. And I did that and I learned a lot. And that was because of you and the efforts of all of the folks here that did this incorporation efforts. 37 years ago, you said, I'm 38. So when you said that, I was kind of like, oh God, I'm a baby. But I deeply appreciate what you all have built for me and my family. And I hope that we are all going to remain good stewards of that dream and vision. Thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
By the way, there's extra covers. People keep asking me for the book. Well, the book is in the city's hands, not mine, but there are extra covers like this out on the table. If you don't get a book, at least you can get the cover. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item, please.
Next item is presentation number 5, presentation of proclamation honoring the Kiwanis Club's 50th anniversary.
So I'm going to read the whereas here, and I would like for my colleagues to join me down at the podium. But if I could have the members from Kiwanis come up. Hey, children, behave.
Guy looks familiar.
So many of you probably recognize the tall, dark, and handsome gentleman here. This is my husband, Ben Middleton, and he's the incoming president of Kiwanis. And this was one of the first organizations we got involved in when we came here as a family to Citrus Heights. I believe that, I'm pretty sure it was Veronica who hooked my husband into becoming the Easter Bunny the first year we participated. I will never forget that costume. We still have the pictures hanging on our wall. But you guys have been doing work in this community for 50 years, and we would like to acknowledge that. So starting with the first whereas the Kiwanis Club of Citrus Heights was chartered in 1972, and the members of the Kiwanis Club of Citrus Heights are devoted to improving the world one child and one community at a time. The Kiwanis Club of Citrus Heights is a diamond sponsor of the Kiwanis Family House, active member of the Connect Citrus Heights, and sponsor of 3 key clubs, including the Mesa Verde High School Key Club. And the club continues to provide support to local nonprofits such as the Sunrise Food Ministry, the Sayonara Center, Citrus Heights Heart, Single Mom Strong, and the Citrus Heights Police Activities League. The Kiwanis Club of Citrus Heights has raised and contributed in excess of $1 million to the Citrus Heights community since 1972. Now, therefore, be resolved, the City Council hereby honors the Kiwanis Club of Citrus Heights on the occasion of their 50th anniversary, where I've set my hand on this 22nd day of September, 2022. Oh, no. Don't go anywhere. Now, this is the part where you guys say words.
Bill, you do it.
Hi, my name's Bill Hooper. I guess I'm up here because I've been in that club for 44 of those years. So, and I'm a retired high school principal, Cass Robley High School. I watched with great interest all the efforts to make this a city and watched it grow. I've been, when I was president of the club the second time, I met with the new chief of police, and our format was, I'd like to give you 5 goals that I'd like, chief, and you give me 5 goals you'd like. And Number 2 on my list was PALS, and number 5 on his list was PALS. And he says, I can't do it now, Bill. I've just got too much, but we'll do it. And I said, well, when you do it, I'd like to be part of it. I've been fortunate enough to be part of it. I'm now fortunate enough to see a younger group coming in so that hopefully we won't die, that we'll keep going just like the city of Citrus Heights. We're so happy to have Ben on board as a leader, Veronica right behind him as the vice president, and my wife even stepped in as secretary. So I think we got a great group. We're here to support you in any way we can, and thank you for all you're doing. Thank you for recognizing us.
No. Still, we're still not done. Now for the hard part is getting together for the photo. So stay right there.
We're going down.
All of us, yes, please.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, now that that mushy moment is over, next item.
Our next item is presentation number 6, presentation of a proclamation recognizing September 2022 as Prostate Cancer Awareness Month.
Thank you, Mayor. To all the men out there here and women, City of Citrus Heights proclamation recognizing September 2022 Prostate Cancer Awareness Month. Whereas prostate cancer is most frequently diagnosed cancer in men and the second leading cause of deaths in men. And whereas 1 in 8 men have a lifetime probability of developing prostate cancer, 1 in 8 women have also the lifetime probability of developing breast cancer. And whereas the American Cancer Society estimates that there will be 268,492 cases of prostate cancer in the USA in 2022, resulting in an estimated 34,500 deaths. And it is estimated that 26,890 men in California will be diagnosed with prostate cancer this year, and it's estimated that 4,130 men will die from the disease this year. And whereas the incidence of prostate cancer is almost 73% higher in non-Hispanic Black men than in non-Hispanic white men for reasons that remain unclear. And whereas prostate cancer death rates decline in the mid-1990s to mid-2021s due to earlier detection through PSA testing and advances in treatment, and whereas the 5-year survival rate approaches 100% for prostate cancer is diagnosed and treated early, develops to 31% when it spreads in other parts of the body. And whereas risk factors for prostate cancer are increasing age, African ancestry, a family history of the disease, and certain inherited genetic conditions, and whereas the American Cancer Society recommends that men have a conversation with their healthcare provider and to make an informed decision as to about whether to be tested for prostate cancer. And whereas the City of Citrus Heights City Council joins communities across the nation to increase the awareness of this about the importance for men to make the informed decision for their health care provider about early detection and testing for prostate cancer. Now, therefore, be it resolved, the City Council of the City of Citrus Heights does hereby designate September 2022 as Prostate Cancer Awareness Month. In witness thereof, we have set our hand and the seal 22 September 2022, signed Mayor Portia Middleton.
And I do believe that we have Beverly Nicholson here to accept the proclamation and to make some brief comments if she would like.
Thank you very much, Vice Mayor, for reading our proclamation. I am Beverly Nicholson. I'm a registered nurse, and I'm here representing the California Prostate Cancer Coalition. And I have to say the Greater Sacramento Prostate Cancer Support Group, which I facilitate, and we're celebrating 30 years of existence helping men in our community. It is sponsored by Dignity Health, UC Davis Cancer Center, and Sutter Cancer Center. So it is such an important healthcare issue for men. And I'm so thankful that you were able to make these important statistics, educate Citrus Heights about these important statistics. I appreciate that. I would urge men to talk to their physicians about their risk factors and what would be appropriate healthcare screening for them. And then the partners of these men, the men in your life who you love, please urge them to have these conversations. So thank you so very much for helping us with this awareness. Appreciate it.
Stand for a moment for a photo.
Okay.
The men are here to thank you for your
I'm so pleased. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. Thank you
Very welcome.
very much.
Congratulations. Thank you for all you do.
Next item, please.
Our next item is comments by council members and regional board updates.
Mr. Miller, let's start with you.
Thanks. I knew you'd call on me if I took a bite of cookie. Really don't have much to report. What was ill last week, but so I missed the Regional Transit Board meeting, but did attend the Capital Corridor Joint Powers Authority meeting yesterday. Just a note, I mean, this is a rail service between Sacramento and San Jose, but I think one of the things interesting to us is they're putting a third track in from Sacramento to Roseville. And we approved it in 2015. This is going to take forever, I think, but we just now moving forward at the 60% design level. The right-of-way acquisition phase is done, but it wasn't funded this year by the state. And the funding for 2022 is going to be far more substantial. So we're counting on that to continue the design. And I believe it's I don't want to give you the wrong year. I can't, probably about 2030 we'd see something like this. I know they're taking care of Business 80 with some of the same funds to at the river crossing there. But that's all I have to report.
Thank you for that. Mr. Daniels.
Thank you very much. Air Board met today, lots of stuff going on. The wildfire smoke response emergency plan is out, if I got that right. Basically, it works to have a coordinated effort if we experience what we did. I believe it was 2018 or something like that, when we had such extreme problems in the Valley, the Sacramento Valley region in regards to smoke from wildfires. And so hopefully a better coordinated response to what we need to do throughout the region, schools closing, that kind of a thing. October 5th is Clean Air Day. So breathe all the air that you can breathe on October 5th. In relationship to that, let you know that RT is giving free rides to everybody from October 1st to October 8th, including the Smart Ride program. So if you need to get somewhere, go somewhere, especially on October 5th, you can get a free ride on the bus. The state, they talk a little bit about the state budget. It includes tons of money for vehicle electrification, air monitoring, vehicle purchasing subsidies. There's 400 million that's going to be used for forest thinning, 265 million to create fire breaks. So there's at least a good acknowledgement that we have to do a better job with our forests if we're going to prevent massive forest fires. And that's it from the Air Board. Yesterday, I had the pleasure to attend the Citrus Heights Chamber grand opening ribbon cutting for their new audio visual studio. Quite amazing. If you get a chance, get over there, and I'm sure the president would take you through for a tour. It's a nice little resource, and it's offered to everybody and anybody, including council members, to go over. You can do a podcast type thing there. Let me see. Friday tomorrow will be the Heart Spaghetti Fest for our homeless advocates. And if you, I think there are still tickets available. I haven't heard that they sold out, but tickets are available. So if you go online, you could probably find out how to get a ticket for that. I think it's $25 and goes for a very good cause. And then I think I had one more. Sunday is Sunday Fun Day. Back again after several years of not being able to do that. Sunday Fun Day is back. And I hope I have the time right, 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. And maybe we'll hear a little something about that extra in a bit. But it's going to be a big celebration, our 25th anniversary celebration on top of that. Bands, craziness, dogs, cats, a whole work. So come on out for that. And then the final thing I want to do is the speaker earlier tonight mentioned the Antelope 80 area. And I want to take the opportunity to thank the city manager, the police department, the general services department, and everybody else who was related to all of that in the hard work in getting that cleaned up. It's frustrating. It's incredibly frustrating because it's in our city, but it's like somebody set down a piece of land or whatever on top of our city and said, you don't have control over that area. We're working on having control, for lack of a better term, but to be able to respond to those kind of issues in those areas specifically quicker and whatnot. What we saw happen over there was just disgusting. It's not Citrus Heights. That's not what we're going to tolerate. And I really want to, again, extend an appreciation for the effort that's going into coordinating with the state for us to be able to respond to that quickly and take care of that before it gets to where we saw it get, because that's not us, and we're not going to tolerate that. And that's it.
Thank you. Ms. Burns.
Thank you. Our regional sand board met last week, and a couple of things I just want to go over. We are in the process of putting together a biogeneration facility, for short Biogen. And this facility is used to take digester gas to produce power and heat for on-site use. It's an important project. It's going to allow us to reuse our own material for our own purposes to generate power. And the construction will start sometime next year and it'll be finished by 2025. We directed the staff to consider both bids for the use of internal combustion engines as well as fuel cell power. So that is a big project that will be coming online in a few years. Also, we had a presentation about sewer impact fees related to tiny houses. In April, a gentleman from West Sac had inquired about getting a reduced sewer impact fee. And right now, the way it's priced is based on single family occupancy, regardless of the size of the home. So that will be discussed further, and I don't think there'll be any decisions on that because there's really no precedent setting at this time. We don't have any tiny home communities in our area, so staff is doing some research to see how other areas of the state address this if they have them in their community. So this is going to continue on for the next year or so. And then we also had a PAL meeting last week. And so Sunday Funday was mentioned, which by the way is at Rush Park. And if you'd like to support PAL, if you want to go and get VIP parking, which is right off of Antelope and very close to everything, a $20 donation will get you on that parking lot. And then it all goes to our Police Activities League to help fund all of the programs they do for kids. We also, come by the PAL booth I'll be working at. We are going to be raffling off an acoustic guitar signed by the band, that the lead band whose name I can't remember. Ash, do you know? It's a country band. It's the country band.
Keenan Smith and then Austin Moe.
Yeah. And so tickets will be $5 for one raffle ticket and $10 for three. So come support PAL there. Thank you for that. And then PAL is going to be marching in the Howell-Loween Annual Parade and Harvest Festival on Saturday, October 15th. They'll be marching in the parade, and they'll have a table there too to help families sign up kids for the program. And we'll be accepting the annual donation that the NorCal Cruisers generously give us at this event. And then finally, as far as activities are concerned, we are going to do the trunk or treat program again this year at the police parking lot. But this year will be different because we are out of the COVID prohibitions. This year, people will be able to walk through it instead of having to drive through it. So I think it'll provide a more up close and fun event. It'll be the 26th from 4 to 8, and businesses in the community are being invited to participate and have a location there, and they're all dressed up and making it a lot of fun for the kids. And then in keeping with our honoring of Kiwanis, I just wanted to give you an example of how they have supported the Police Activities League. By this year, for many of the families coming out of COVID, it's a year of hardship. So they have donated $500 to cover all the dues for the kids for 1 year. So thank you to Kiwanis for that. And Bill Hooper is a great representative. We're served on the board with me. Couple things around town. On the 9th, I attended the ribbon cutting and the opening of the Royal Stage Theater Group at Sunrise Mall. This is a great new amenity for Citrus Heights. They took out that big corner location just across from Men's Macy's. And not only will they be able to rehearse there, but they have a stage where they'll be able to perform. And this is a seasoned children's group that's been around for about 10 years. And so we're really happy to welcome them to Citrus Heights. On the 13th, the Citrus Heights Chamber of Commerce sponsored a candidate forum night. And so we had candidates for all the city council seats. Most of them showed up for that. It was a lot of very interesting, very good questions were asked, and you kind of get to know some of the candidates better than I knew before. And then recently we had a quality of life committee meeting and to make recommendations for funding, which will be addressed at a future council meeting. And then finally, my own neighborhood association, Chasen, had a city council night and a school board night this past Tuesday, where we were able to hear the candidates for city council and school board. And that was also very informative. And I'd like to thank my Chasen president, Kathy Morris, for putting it on, and Bill Shirley, one of our board members, for facilitating it that evening. And that's what I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Schaefer.
Thank you, Mayor. It has been a very busy couple of weeks here. I'm going to kind of start with next month and sort of roll back in time. So I want to start out with next month being October is a manufacturing month. That is where lots of manufacturers in the local area. There are 2,700 manufacturers of various different products, from orthopedic implants to aircraft parts to lots of SpaceX parts are made locally here. This is a time of year where the manufacturers will open their doors and let the public come in and tour their facilities and see what they're doing there. So it's very interesting time. That's next month, is for October. And then rolling back to so next on Sunday, really encourage everyone to make it out to Sunday Fun Day. I will have a booth out there. And the only reason I put a booth up there is because I want to be accessible to the residents of the city. So if you have any questions or any concerns, or you just want to talk and see how this process works, this is one thing that and I'll get on to that. I was going to move on to another topic, but yeah, it's a good time to come out and see who's running. Most of the candidates have booths out there, so you can meet with them and talk with them. Today, I actually reviewed. I participated in the flash vote, which is great. I was really impressed with the level of responses and the thoughtfulness of some of the responses. Yes, there were some negative ones in there, but there were some really thoughtful responses there. So I encourage you to really engage with the city and make your voices known through Flash Vote. So today I had the Sacramento Library Board meeting, which we reviewed the budget and we accepted our new $56 million budget for the library, and that is for all of us to use. I intend on getting this book into the library, and I also intend on pushing the school district into bringing this book into their own library. And so I had the opportunity to speak with Mayor Severde, both government classes, and a lot of the students didn't understand how local government works. And this is where you have the most influence. How much influence do you have over your Congress people or but this board right here, we're your neighbors. We live in the community with you. We are as accessible as you can get. And I really try to encourage people on social media, come to the council meeting. You can complain all you want up there, but really you want to be heard, come here and talk to us. So that's another piece there. So at the library board meeting, that was a really good outcome there. So on the 15th, Sacramento Taxpayers Association had their annual dinner. It's also an opportunity for candidates who are running for office to come in and speak to a group of about 100 people. It's very, very well attended. It was pretty much sold out. And it was great to hear some of the school board candidates from all over the area, from not only from Citrus Heights, from Sacramento, from Elk Grove, from all over. So it was a really good opportunity to really get to know these people that you're electing to school boards or city councils. And then going back to the 13th, I was also at the forum. Again, understanding who you're really voting for instead of just checking a box on a ballot, understanding who these people are. It was really important. It was very, very engaging. And I appreciate the Chamber of Commerce for doing a very good job on putting that. I wish it was more well attended. We had about 25 people there, but nonetheless, they did record it. So, and then finally, I attended the 9/11 forum, the 9/11 commemoration at Sylvan Cemetery. It was very moving. When 9/11 happened that Tuesday morning, I was in line at a Southwest flight, ready to fly off to Salt Lake City. And when we heard the news about the airplane flying into one of the towers, initially everybody thought, well, this is an air traffic control problem. This is nobody dreamed that it was a terrorist attack. Then when I got on the airplane, then it's sort of the rumor flowed through the airplane that yes, it was a terrorist attack. I remember thinking the same thing I felt in 1983 when the Marine barracks got bombed. I was in the military. I was in a military police. My job was security. How in the world did we let this happen? How could this possibly have happened? And it's because we relaxed our guard just for that moment. And unfortunately, I feel that we've done that again. We're now much more complacent about, and I'm just very concerned that we're not vigilant enough to really prevent this sort of thing from happening again. So the 29, almost 3,000 people that died in 9/11, it's just, we have to keep their memory alive. We have to remember how devastated we were to be vigilant and not have this happen again. With that, Mayor, I'm done.
Thank you. I will be brief because most of the things that my colleagues have covered, I was there, we did the things together. But the most important thing that happened was the beginning of the month, League of Cities Annual Conference, where I serve as your statewide director. And the city manager and I were there. We attended a lot of different study sessions. We learned a lot and came back with a lot of great ideas that we're going to try and see if we can bring up during our strategic planning session coming up in October. I would encourage folks that for that strategic planning session to come up, make public comment, get involved, and let us hear what you're thinking about what's going on in our city and how we can improve. Our council has great ideas, but we want to hear the ideas from the community also. So I encourage you to come out to that strategic planning session, and that'll be announced shortly. And with that, next item.
Next item is consent calendar items 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12.
So do we have approval? Second?
Motion by,
Okay, go ahead.
motion by Daniels, second by Bruins,
I'd like to pull item 10, please.
with the exception of item 10. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And let's go ahead and just take item 10 now.
Item 10, the subject is resolution approving a cost of living adjustment plus a one-time payment for full-time unrepresented employees and adopting an amended salary table.
Yeah, I was waiting.
Oh, okay. So,
Yeah.
so my concern is, so I've had a couple of people reach out to me and feel like, hey, wait a second, what's the justification for this? I just wanted to have a discussion about this. And just make it clear to the public that this is a group of folks that haven't had a raise in a couple of years. This isn't something, so, but I'd like Susan to cover that piece of it if we could.
Just a brief overview. Sure.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and Council. I'm just going to briefly go over the updates that we have here to the cost of living adjustment. So moving. Next slide. Oh, I don't have control, sorry. Okay, really, it's to cover, as you know, the inflationary pressures that we have seen across the board, across the country. And just looking at this item right here, you can see it's ticked over 8%. And I know that's also been in the news and also been reviewed. So staff did do a brief analysis regionally and to take a poll as to what's going on and a pulse of what our neighboring agencies are doing. And as you can see, looking across there, the neighboring agencies ranged from about 6% as a high down to about 2.25%. It is also worthy to note that a couple of agencies did do a two-time payout, once in January and once in July, and then also one-time payout. So the other point was that here in the unrepresented group, we did have a 5% in 2021 and a 2% in 2022 for the, POA and PEA. However, the unrepresented group did not receive anything. And because of the inflationary pressures, we just wanted to be able to help and assist with that. And again, this is the average. So the low adjustments was 2.25, the high was 6.0, with an average of 3.46%, not including the one-time payments, whereas the unrepresented group for the city of Citrus Heights received nothing. And just a quick budget impact. The impact was about $290,000, but there is no budget adjustment required because of the savings, and also because of the fact that we are projecting to come in close to about $2 million for the year end of fiscal 21 to 22. So basically, considering the cost of living adjustment of 3% retroactive to July 3rd, 2022, and a one-time payment of 3% as well was our recommendation.
Madam Mayor, if I could add a little bit to what Susan covered. Thank you, Susan. The other thing that should be noted here is this is for our unrepresented employees, as is the topic, but none of the executive management is included as part of this group. So your city manager, your directors, any of your executive management team are not part of this action. So it's truly our unrepresented staff here at City Hall that definitely produce a lot of work. And so wanted to make sure that we're acknowledging that. Definitely did a thorough study of what our neighboring jurisdictions did. And it's important from a retention and attraction standpoint that we're acknowledging what's happening within the region and also acknowledging the good work that our team does here.
And would you just clarify for me, Mr. Feeney, the difference between represented and unrepresented?
So represented is basically represented labor groups. So where there's unionized labor. And so like, for instance, our police officers association, as well as our police employee associations, those are both represented labor groups where they have representation that negotiate contracts on their behalf. And so those were negotiated contracts that happened, during that same period of time where you're seeing adjustments where the unrepresented group did not receive an adjustment during that period.
Thank you.
So if I could offer just point of clarification, we could roll back a couple of slides and where it talks about the budget adjustment.
Yes.
And I just want to point out that there you are. Okay, so this net impact of 50,000 because we had filled positions that were unfilled, we had a surplus left over that offset the 240,000. So we actually we're only increasing the budget by 50,000 to do this.
So the net impact to the budget total is 290,000. To the general fund is 240,000, and all other funds is 50,000. So the total is 290,000.
Okay, but there was an offset.
Yes, there was an offset of
in
about.
labor savings that kind of almost nullified this, made it a very, very low amount of impact.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Can I also just take a moment to thank my fellow council members? This is, I think I can say this as part of a closed session.
The reference that we talked about it, but any other
I'm not getting into
members'
details.
comments,
I'm
Madam
general. That there was a lot of back and forth and there was a lot of consideration as to what's fair, what we can do. And we want these employees to understand that we do care about you, definitely. And in the end, this is what we thought was, again, with give and take from all of us, something that was very fair and hopefully an indication of that we do value. And so we could have just said no to nothing and let's look towards the future, but we didn't do that. And I really appreciate my fellow council members and everybody working together to get that message out.
If there's no further comment, I can entertain a motion.
I move approval.
Second.
Motion by Vice Mayor Schaefer, second by Ms. Bruins. All those in favor?
Aye.
So moved. Next item, please.
Next item is regular calendar, item number 13. The subject is potential annexation work plan. The recommendation is that council review the staff presentation and provide direction to staff if future action is desired.
Sorry, I'll get Amy. Is this? My name is Casey Kempenaar, Community Development Director. I'm joined by Jose Henriquez from Sacramento Local Agency Formation Commission. He is the expert. I will give you an overview and some high-level pictures of how annexations work, and Jose will answer all the tough questions. So, can I? So just some background on this topic. Back in May at the Council Strategic Planning Retreat, the council talked about annexations and directed us to come back with a plan for consideration. So that's why we're here tonight. Some context within our general plan. Our general plan is like our Constitution, and it's been around since 2000, and annexation has been a topic that's been discussed since we incorporated. And that first general plan really memorialized that. And this goal talks about using land available for economic development, but also talks about kind of the steps of going through LAFCO, pursuing key areas, and then last but not least, making sure it's fiscally sound for the community. What is LAFCO? A LAFCO is a state-created board. It's quasi-judicial, and they are countywide, and they're a commission that's in charge with making sure cities and special districts are growing appropriately and have a set of legal guidelines that they follow. They also create missional service reviews, which looks at city operations when it comes to annexation or incorporation. And they also help control the spheres of influence for cities that are in Sacramento County. So as I mentioned, Jose Henriquez is our executive director, and the appointed members are listed here below from all over the county. So briefly, this is a very high level of how the annexation process works. Either the council or residents can initiate that process, the council through a resolution or residents through a petition. So then there's kind of three major steps that I won't go into too deeply here, but the LAFCO would hold a sphere of influence amendment hearing. They would consider an approval hearing, and then there's an opportunity for conducting authority or a protest hearing. There's several contributing factors that go into all those steps. Number one is CEQA. We still have to perform CEQA on any annexation to make sure there's no environmental impact. Municipal service review takes a look at who's providing what services and how that will change under a potential annexation. Costs, there's costs involved with going through the process for LAFCO staff, for doing fiscal impact analysis and so forth. And then fiscal impact analysis itself, there are certain standards that have to be met as you consider annexation on the impact to the city budget and impact to the annexed area. So this has been discussed before. In 2006, the city did an evaluation, some discussions with the county about two potential annexations. The Roseville Point, or sometimes referred to Northwest Reserve annexation on the north side of the city off of Roseville Road, and then Greenback Gateway. So as you can see on this map, this is the general plan map. The area highlighted in red here is the area where the general plan said we might want to consider annexing in, and Roseville Point is this a subset here of this larger area. And then Greenback Gateway is essentially everything west of the city limits on Greenback Lane to I-80. So the Roseville Point was what the city looked at in 2006, 2007. This shows a map. It's mostly single family homes with a park and a water tank, as well as a vacant commercial piece of land at Antelope and Roseville Road. And then Greenback Gateway, as I mentioned, was pretty much everything west of the city limits to the I-80. So there was some analysis done, and there was a lot of conversations between the city and the county to get to that point. And so there was a couple iterations that were included in your packet. But the bottom line was at that time, the projection showed a deficit if we served, or if we annexed only the residential portion of Roseville Point, not the commercial land. At that point, if we did include those smaller commercial properties near the corner, if it was assumed that it would be developed as a neighborhood commercial with something like a grocery store, it would result in about a $40,000 surplus for the community if that were to move forward. The Greenback Gateway, on the other hand, did have a pretty high deficit ranging between $45,000 and $134,000 per year. Obviously, a lot's changed since 2006, 2007, property values, state law. There's been a number of changes that will affect the outcomes of this. So these are just kind of a baseline for your consideration. We would have to update these if the council were to proceed with one of these locations. So some of the key things that LAFCO looks at is revenue related. The annexation you have to demonstrate that there's sufficient revenue to serve those annexed lands. And that can be done through extending existing charges like sales tax, utility user tax. And then a key component is the negotiations with the county and talking about the property tax and how that deal is made. And then if there ends up being a revenue shortfall, that could be made up by a vote of the impacted or annexed properties, essentially to tax themselves. So until you get into the number crunching for the fiscal impact analysis, it's difficult to say how.
Voting, would that be the property owners? In other words, they don't necessarily have to live in Citrus Heights?
Good evening, Madam Mayor, Vice Mayor, Mr. Vice Mayor, staff and members of the audience. I am Jose Enriquez. I am the Executive Officer for Sacramento LAFCO. So to your question, you're asking on the voting aspect, those would be the people who have the ability to vote, are those in the impacted area or the subject territory that you're looking to annex.
So the residents, not the owners? Let's say it's a rental and they live in San Jose. Does the owner get to vote on this, or is it the resident?
Yeah, this is the tough question that Mr. Campinar was talking about. So there is the protest hearing, the conducting authority hearing that allows the landowners and registered voters to voice to LAFCO whether they agree or disagree with their decision to approve the annexation. So they do actually have a voice through a two-tiered process. Either one can trigger an election. So if they could actually overturn it if there's sufficient protests. But if there's, but they could trigger an election if a sufficient number of landowners vote to protest the LAFCO annexation. And then in that case, the registered voters get to vote.
Mr. Enriquez, just for clarification then, initially it would be the property owners, but ultimately it could be the tenants, whether it's of those, whether they're commercial or residents. So they could each would have an opportunity if it went that far.
Just a small clarification, Councilmember Bruin. So basically, in the protest hearing, both the landowners and the registered voters have a voice to submit a vote. In some cases, they're the same. In other cases, they're separate. But if either one triggers sufficient number of votes, it should be basically over 25% of the people in there, either 25% of landowners or 25% of registered voters. If they trigger an election, then only the registered voters get to vote.
Okay.
Interesting.
So then if you are the registered voter and the property owner, you get one vote or two?
If you, in the general election, if it goes to the,
On a protest vote?
at a protest go, it's proportional to how much ownership of the land you own. So in a typical residential home with a joint tenancy, let's say husband and wife, basically each of them get a vote, but the assessed value of the property, it's halved, especially if it's a joint tenancy, it's 50-50.
Complicated.
Okay.
So just a reminder, the council's direction in May was to take a look at annexation. The three listed here were ones that were specifically mentioned during that: Roosevelt Point, Dewey Drive or Celtic Cross, and then the northwest corner of Fair Oaks Boulevard and Madison Avenue.
Answer a question on that?
Yes, ma'am.
Before we move on, if you'd go back to that slide, please. So what happened? So it is Dewey Drive and Celtic Cross. They're not part of the Greenback Greenway.
Correct. Yeah, that one wasn't specifically mentioned at the council strategic retreat,
but northwest corner of Fair Oaks was. And I remember back in the incorporation days when we were working on incorporation with LAFCO, that, that corner did not, because they had a Fair Oaks address, didn't want to be in Citrus Heights. So we carved them out because they were built in no votes. But today it might be different. So I'm wondering why, because we've, 25 years of proving the fact that we provide good services, we have good police, and that's mostly commercial or all commercial. I would think that would potentially be a benefit to them. So is there any reason why you did not include that in the analysis?
That was just, the analysis that were provided were the ones we had done previously. We wanted to make sure we had direction before we spend any funds
Okay,
looking
got
at
it. So we're just doing historical now. We haven't looked forward yet. Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, so we'll get some direction tonight, and then depending on what the council direction is, I have a slide up here that talks about our proposed next steps.
Thank you.
So again, the Roosevelt Point is all the composer streets that you're familiar with, adjacent to Roosevelt Rail Yards, shown here, just to the northwest of the city limits. Fair Oaks and Madison here, Councilmember Bruins is the area you were referencing. It's known for the Ferrari building and a couple other commercial establishments there.
Slow down.
Sorry.
Okay, thank
Dewey Drive, I believe what was referred to during the council retreat was Celtic Cross, which is the church that's in the city, but there's this odd parcel that is out of the city that's now a senior facility. So I think that this general area was what was discussed at that meeting. And then also I threw in the Greenback Gateway, and that wasn't specifically mentioned at the meeting, but obviously has been a point of conversation in the past. So tonight we're asking the council to give us some direction if they would like us to take the next steps on any or all these or none of them. And so once we have the specific geographies identified, this is kind of the proposed work plan. It's really important for us to have that dialogue with Sacramento County because we need to have the numbers which come from that to help us do the financial analysis. So we have to start those conversations. Once kind of all these would kind of happen in tandem, we'd also do some targeted outreach to those impacted geographies to hear from those residents and make sure that that's a feasible option that they're wanting to proceed with this, because as Jose described, 25% could go to a vote and it could be a no. So we want to make sure we're using our resources effectively. So mailers, social media, and then we envision some sort of open house where we can answer questions and have experts there to answer questions and concerns that folks may have. At the same time, we'd kind of crunch the numbers with the preliminary fiscal impact analysis, and that price range can vary depending on how many we choose and how big they are, but kind of a ballpark is somewhere between 10,000 and 25,000 per geography. There might be some cost savings if we kind of lump them together. Or some of the smaller ones might have a little bit different, but that's just to give you a range. So then we would present all this to the council, the findings of what the county has told us, what we're hearing from the community, and then what the impact analysis shows before we take our next steps. So that's it in a nutshell. Happy to answer any questions and then look forward to your direction.
Before I take questions from my colleagues, are there any questions from the audience here? None. Mr. Daniels?
Oh, thank you very much. So I just find it really ironic that we had this thing about the incorporation effort tonight on the very night, 25 years after we become a city, that we finally get to what I call the cleanup. It's just a cleanup. And I hope we look at all of them. I think they all deserve to be looked at. I'm concerned about setting up for failure in the sense of when I went through the report, the staff report and all that, and I looked at things like assumptions and stuff, it really looked like I'm trying to understand when you say that it creates deficits, how it can create a deficit, by bringing, let's say, Roseville Point into the city, somehow automatically that creates a deficit. And so can you just explain a little bit of that on that, how that happens, and how these assumptions are factored in, if they're solid, or can they be, disregarded if we wanted to?
Well, I think these assumptions are old too, right? They're 15 plus years old. So part of our analysis would be to update those based on things that have occurred. But the deficit would occur if it costs more to serve the properties than it generates some tax revenue to pay for those services.
And would that include police services, roads, all that kind of stuff?
Correct. Yeah. So
and then what I thought I saw was, and again, I was looking through it very quickly, was that say police services. Is it that you just make an assumption that 289 homes are going to produce, 240 calls per service every 6 months and blah, 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 and yada, yada. Is it all just assumptions, or are we going to go back to, say, Sacramento County and say, hey, at Roseville Point, how many calls for service did you guys have in that area last year, or over 5 years or something like that?
There is definitely a science and an art to it. I can't claim to know exactly how the calculations work, but I think that it behooves us to take a look at all the data that we can to make the most reasonable assumptions that we can.
I agree totally, but you call it science and art, and I might call it something else, voodoo something. And I just don't want us to set ourselves up for failure, because again, I really, when this comes back, I want to know, are we required to look at a certain thing, or is it an option for us and to create assumptions when we're looking at these things? can we weigh them in different ways? I think is extremely important in making those decisions. And that's it.
Oh, go ahead, Tim.
So and I realize this is a bit down the road, but does revenue neutrality come in? Do we automatically give up the property taxes for those properties that get annexed?
Revenue neutrality is only a discussion that happens in incorporation. In this particular case, what happens is that, as Mr. Campinar indicated, what you're looking for is to make sure that at least it's not detrimental either to the city or to the residents who are being annexed. And the other thing that LAFCO looks at on the other side of the coin is that if the city benefits from having the annexation, it's not at the cost of its existing customers. So you're looking at all sides of the ledger to make sure that it all pays out. But there's no what we know is the revenue neutrality kind of the divorce settlement that happens in the corporation that doesn't come into play here.
Did they ask for some of the property taxes? And I'm sorry for interrupting. Just following up on the
Jeannie's turn.
question. Okay, I'll ask it when I.
So I suspect that when the analysis is done this time, it will be substantially different because when it was done for Roseville Point all those years ago, we couldn't benefit from any revenue. And that was the kicker at that time. It was all going to be expense. There was no revenue coming in because we were under the binds of revenue neutrality. So it'll be really interesting to see we move forward with this, how that shakes out at this time and what it looks like just based on the residents, the properties that exist today with the opportunity, potential, some small commercial development as well. The other thing that I on that particular one of the four, I think we have to be very careful about and considered about where our boundary line is, because on the other side of, if Roseville Road is part of this, in the entire side of Roseville, both sides of Roseville Road is part of this, that could paint a different picture than because of the issues, the ongoing issues on the other side, which, just butts right up to Southern Pacific Railroad property. May have an easement in there, may not, we don't know yet. But so that particular property, I think we have to be very conscientious about that because of the property on the other side of the street and the condition of that road. So that would have to be, I'm sure, part of the negotiations with the county. So on the Almond Orchard, which is all commercial, basically there are no residents. It's all property owners. So that would be, my understanding would be if they don't protest, then it goes forward, if they don't reach the level of protest. So will we, when you bring this back to us at a future date, would we be able to consider each of the 4 areas individually as an annexation project, or do we have to look at it as a whole?
I think the way we have it envisioned is that we would bring back some of the data before we officially submit to LAFCO to start that process. So we have some opportunity to make a decision at that point when we have some better data to share.
Okay. Okay. And then that decision could be made at that time.
Correct.
Thank you. That's all.
Okay, back to revenue neutrality. What is the difference between revenue neutrality and potential property tax exchange with the county?
That is a very good question. Revenue neutrality has to do with the fact that the county continues to provide services even to a city. So like, for example, like judicial, the courts, jail, all those costs are still being incurred. And so the property taxes is, and commercial taxes and sales taxes being generated in an area, if they went 100% to the city, it becomes a deficit to the county because they're still extending services, but they're not getting revenue to offset it. So the whole discussion regarding revenue neutrality had to do with, well, what's the price of divorce here? And try to have a soft landing so that it's equitable for both the city to have sufficient funds to do what it needs to do, but also for the county has a transition period in which they can offset the losses of what's generated in Citrus Heights by doing something else in other parts of the county. The property tax exchange, and I'm sorry, I'm going to have to get a little wonkish here. And if I put some members of the audience to sleep, you'll have to forgive me. Basically, it's actually, it's relation to what happened with Proposition 13. As you know, prior to Prop 13, local jurisdictions could raise property taxes at will. Prop 13 caps it at 1% with a 2% annual growth. And because it is capped, there are different agencies, Citrus Heights being one of them, that have property tax as part of their mix of revenue sources in order to provide extend services. But Prop 13 caps how much you can raise. And so the property tax dollar then becomes the question of how do you allocate it? So a portion of each property tax dollar that gets generated has to be allocated in a certain formula. And what happens with an annexation is that you have a new jurisdiction coming in and saying, we want a portion of that property tax dollar. It's a zero-sum game. So it becomes a negotiation of like, well, how much do you take? How much are we going to give you? And so it becomes a negotiation between the two entities. Under Revenue Tax 99, the city and the county are equal partners. So they do have to sit down at a table and kind of hammer out. So, you are, by annexing an area, you are relieving the county of providing certain services such as road maintenance, traffic control, law enforcement, et cetera. And so that's a relief on the county side. But at the same time, the city has to say, well, we need to get certain revenues to offset the cost of us extending services here. And so it becomes a negotiation. And that's the difference. Under a revenue neutrality, it's an agreement for a set amount of time that they're going to have certain payments. And once that's done, it's done. Property tax exchange is basically saying, how are we going to reformulate that property tax dollar? Who gets what?
Last time we discussed this years ago, county wanted in perpetuity all the property taxes, and that kind of killed the deal. Hopefully, the new county executive is a little more open-minded about this. But the other question I had, and can we go to slide 17, I think? Does that, let me get oriented here again. Oh, there's Coyle, and there's the hospital. Any chance of bringing the hospital into this fray?
I think, we're looking for you for direction. Some things to consider as we look at different land uses is Mercy San Juan is a nonprofit hospital. They don't pay property tax.
Ew.
So,
That would be a big deficit out of the
it'd
chute.
be great. It'd be great to have those jobs here in the city, right? But if there's not a reasonable allocation to help cover the services, that maybe it doesn't make sense.
Okay. Good answer.
And if I may, one of the challenges that your board is going to have to, or your council is going to have to decide on is basically where do you draw the line? Like, so for example, the northwest of Madison and Fair Oaks, there's a clear demarcation. You've got two streets. You can say there's your boundary. In this specific case, there's no natural boundary, and it is one of the factors that LAFCO has to look at is where does it make sense? On the northwest point, Roseville, you got the railroad tracks. That's a natural boundary. A river, that's a natural boundary. The county line, that's a natural boundary. In this particular case, it's a little bit amorphous. And so your council is going to have to decide where exactly is the line going to be at. Are we going to make it straight across? Are we going to go down the Coyle? So all sorts of questions that you'll be grappling with.
And you touched on it, and as part of the analysis, I'm sure we'll do this, but that really is a key in negotiating with the county is knowing where they're at, what their revenues are and what they may lose, but also the savings for, like you said, storm drain, roads, police services, garbage, anything they have up there like ADA compliance that hasn't been done, those kind of things. Really drill down to see what their savings are, so we're in a good negotiating position.
Yeah, and like you said, some of the assumptions have really changed. When we did this before, we were just getting a police department, so those numbers are going to be way different. On the Roseville Point properties, the vacant properties, like I said, it was assumed that those were going to be a grocery store, neighborhood center, which is pretty lucrative from a sales tax perspective. The current owners of that property, half of it's owned by a gas station developer, and the other half's owned by a mini storage. Gas station does pretty okay for cities. Mini storage, not so much. So those are the types of considerations we need to be aware of as we're considering this.
Thank you.
Then Tim.
Go back to slide number 9. So at that top left-hand corner, I see Roseville Point at the bottom, and then I see that red line going into the rail yard, right?
Correct.
Is that any kind of indication that we would even consider annexing the railroad yard into our city?
That's what the general plan says. There's the policy it talks about looking at industrial opportunities that was been considered in the past. Obviously having the rail yards has its own set of challenges. But I think the thought process when this new general plan was put together and this map came together was there was no other industrial land in the city that may be opportunity. Right now, it's a lot of kind of junkyard or pick and pull type stuff. So that, that comes up with its own set of trade-offs.
Yeah, I don't think I would want to entertain that at all. I don't know how the other council members feel, but I think the role here for our city is to annex in Roseville Point, Roseville Road, all that area, and stop at the rail yard, not even think about bringing that into our city and including the opposite side.
Yeah, I should point out on this map, I failed to mention earlier, that's the outside the city at Fair Oaks and Greenback is included too. That wasn't specifically mentioned or studied previously. Just let you know that the general plan map does show that. That's been developed mostly now. Where the big X is the where it was former movie theater. So that's also one that has been discussed in the past.
Mayor?
I'm going to go back to slide 17, please. So just to clarify, there is a creek bed that kind of becomes a little bit of a natural kind of right behind Northbrook Way there. There is a creek bed that follows through that. That might be something we might consider as a sort of a natural boundary.
Yeah, and I mean, I think we can take a look at it if this is the direction you want
I
us
think
to.
what staff is looking for now, we've had a very robust discussion, but we need to start giving them a little bit of direction. Do we want with them to go down the path of the list that we saw plus the additional things we looked at back in 2006? Or do we want them to kind of do full stop here, we're done? So if I could get like just a couple comments from you guys about which direction you'd like to go into.
If you do want to pursue certain ones that may not be as clear cut, like the Northwest Madison one, some direction for us to say, hey, look at the hospital or don't look at the hospital, or, try to get some more data there, that would be helpful to help us narrow it down if that's the way you wanted to go.
So is there a consensus that we would like to move forward in exploring this?
Absolutely.
Yes, I'd like to see all of the areas considered.
What about, Tim, all the areas, Brett, Steve?
Yeah, absolutely.
All the areas.
Can we define all the areas, please? Just so I make sure
And then the two previous from 2006?
Greenback Gateway, Roseville Point, including the commercial properties.
Almond Orchard.
Almond Orchard, and then the Dewey. Can I get some clarity on the where we want to start?
I think if we dip down and start talking about that's Carmichael, I believe. Bringing Carmichael into Citrus Heights, those people are going to go nuts. I really think they're just going to lose their minds. So
I was just thinking of grabbing a hospital, but it really does us no good financially.
So I apologize, Councilmember Miller. That was just off cursory review. I thought you might go there, and I wanted to be somewhat educated. There may be other benefits that I'm just not aware of at this point.
And I would say to Councilmember Daniels, that's my district. I actually know the group there and they have indicated to me that they would be favorable to this.
I'd love to see it. I mean, I would not object to it in the least bit, but I just don't know if it's going to happen.
So it looks like the council is asking for a buffet. Yes, Jeannie.
To dovetail on Councilmember Daniel's comment regarding Roseville Point, I would be hard pressed to approve any property that includes the rail yards and on the other side of it. I just think we'd be buying into problems, So could we at this point, or would you rather us not at this point limit it to just the Roseville Point and potentially the road because there's going to have to be some road, I think, participation in that and not include the rail yards. And
I think we hear you on the rail yards. I think we could talk to the county about the road and see how that goes. I think that
I would just think that having the rail yard in the city would bring up a lot of other issues besides, the homeless and all that stuff, but other issues by having a railroad tracks going through our city that we don't deal with today. And I don't know what those issues would be if there's, some federal regulations because it's a rail yard going through our city, but am I,
I think there's.
Mr. Enriquez, am I on the right track on that? I mean, could there be some federal considerations if we had a rail yard, a section of railroad track basically going through our city?
There are some air quality noise concerns that I would share with you. There also is no control over what transports through those. There's no local control over what the railroad is carrying there. But at the same time, it is an existing condition.
Would it allow us to have a train station on the new third track that's being built by Capitol Corridor? Parking and, anyway, just a thought. I agree with Councilmember Daniels that we should just look at the housing for now. And my biggest concern is the noise and everything like that. I don't know if you could put a sound wall into the whole equation to be built on Roseville Road. Because a lot of that, the parcels there, the fence doesn't go to, and that's where we've had the biggest problem with encampments and such. And it's, as of today, it's clean, but like we all know, it changes overnight. Yeah.
Vice Mayor?
Can I see the map of Roosevelt Point again, please? Oh, the slightly larger one than this. Well.
9.
So just want to clarify that it would not include any part of the Home Depot, that whole area over there. That's completely out of the.
Well, I think it could. I think the county's going to want to hold on to that a lot more than maybe the homes. I think we could have those conversations if that's your direction. I mean, it sounds to me what the council's telling us is try to get the biggest bang for our buck. That makes the most sense.
That's what I would support. Biggest bang for the buck. Not getting into a big battle over.
Go ahead.
Council, I was just going to add, and just going to add to some of the comments that Casey's making. I think generally, if you're saying generally look at these annexation areas, I think we would do some study, work with the fiscal analysis consultant to understand some of the assumptions we might want to understand as far as annexing land. Like, for instance, if there is a deficit to serve an area, but if you brought a commercial parcel in that takes care of the deficit, then that might be some of the analysis that we want to do. So I don't know that we want to get so tight on parcel specific. And I think if you allow our staff team to work with some consultants to say, here's what it probably should be if this is what you want to annex, and then we would come back at a future meeting and kind of walk through those specific areas and the rationale behind the why.
I agree. I think that's a great approach.
Okay, with that said, does staff feel like they have enough direction?
Yes, we're going to take over Roseville and Orangevale.
Maybe get all the way up to Tahoe.
We understand where we're going, and our next steps will be to kind of regroup it, and then we'll come to you. We'll need to do an RFP and get someone on board and budget allocation, the whole shebang. So we'll bring that back for you guys.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Item.
Next item is regular calendar, item number 14. The subject is considerations and options for pavement restoration strategies. Recommendation is to review the staff presentation and provide direction to staff to proceed with developing long-term planning of citywide pavement restoration plans.
Help me from here. Evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, council members, and City Manager Feeney. Regina Cave, General Services Director, here for the City of Citrus Heights. And this item before you this evening stems from one of the strategic objectives identified by council earlier in this year. There we go. So this item pertains to our pavement restoration objectives. as council may recall, a couple years ago, staff presented to council an update of our pavement management system and at the time of what our pavement conditions look like. Historically, how we have approached our restoration of our streets has typically been based upon the lowest pavement condition index. And that condition index is basically a grade of our streets ranging from 1 to 100. So of our city-owned and maintained streets, we have approximately 236, 237 centerline miles and 462 lane miles. Now, the difference between your center lane and your lane miles is your lane miles take into consideration how many lanes that you have on a roadway. So for instance, Greenback Lane, you've got 6 lanes, but you also have left turn pockets. So essentially almost 7 lanes. With center line miles, you look at a street from point A to point B. So that's why you have the difference between your 236 and your 461. Of our total area of paved streets that we maintain, we have about 24.6% of arterials, 13.5% are collectors, and the remaining balance are residentials. We have about 1,000 streets here in Citrus Heights that we own and maintain. And then we have about 300 streets that we don't maintain, but those are those private streets around the community. So again, the condition categories are PCI ratings from 70 to 100. Those are good streets. Those are your brand new streets down to some streets that have minor aggregate deficiencies. Your 50 to 69, you've got fair, both non-load and load related. So that's your transverse or your longitudinal cracks that are typically from separation and expansion in the asphalt. That's your non-load deficiencies or defects. If you've got alligatoring, so you've got those cracks that look like the back of an alligator, those are load related. Those are usually due to just wear and tear on a street. And then you get into your poor conditions, which are 25 to 49. And of course, anything below 25 is a failed street. In your existing conditions, we are at 51. And actually, we are more closer to 50 as of today. The system is very dynamic and it changes based upon the last time the streets have been updated and any other updates or any repairs that we've done since then. And so we're actually tiering more towards 50 as of today. And we have about 10, almost 11% of our streets are in that very poor failed condition. We've got 41% in the poor condition. We've got 28.2% in that fair condition and almost 20% in our good to very good condition. And this represents the percentages of all of those conditions spread over arterials, collectors, and residentials. They're slightly different than that pie chart I just showed you because these take into consideration what our numbers will look like in 2023. For existing street conditions, when you look at the entire city, if you pay attention to the red are those very poor, and they are spread throughout the city. We do have some concentrations in some areas, of course, and within the business commercial districts, you don't have a whole lot of those streets. But for the most part, you see is a lot of orange. You see a lot of that very poor category that is representative from the chart I showed previously. So back to why I'm here this evening. Historically, we have approached our streets based upon the lowest pavement condition index. And when we reported a couple of years ago, those streets will continue to deteriorate. We don't have sufficient funds as of today, and even taking into consideration what some of our future funding is to move that pendulum out of that very poor and poor condition to shift them into that 70 PCI. So acknowledging that, we are recommending that we do more of a preventative maintenance approach, which is looking at those streets that are still in that somewhat good condition, but we want to push them to a higher standard, push them into that 70 to 80 range so we can get a lot more use out of them, but also focusing on the streets that are used the most by our users. Looking at those arterials, looking at those collectors, looking at some of those areas that are around schools that have a lot more vehicular use, a lot more pedestrian use. And so what we're recommending is to program a minimum of 50% of our anticipated funds. And again, that goes back to some of council's direction from the budget update in June that is programming or intends to program some general fund dollars in the upcoming years, utilizing those funds in tandem with some of the existing funds that we already have programmed, and identifying 50% of those funds to address arterials and collectors. The focus would be on those corridors that aren't already identified as strong candidates for grant funds. As we've talked about in the past, A lot of the grant funding programs continue to move away from the pavement and more focused towards that alternative transportation. So the active transportation, your pedestrian, your separated bike lanes, your separated sidewalks, your transit. Whereas a lot of our arterials and collectors, they already have a lot of those amenities and they can serve our pedestrians, but we really need to focus on the pavement. And so looking at those arterials that don't necessarily qualify for those SACOG type of grant funding programs. And we would prioritize our locations that don't require extensive design or right-of-way acquisition. So arterials that we already have sufficient roadway, we don't need to come in and install sidewalks. We already have the space there. We may need to do ADA upgrades, traffic signal modifications, maybe some median restoration, but really focusing on the pavement. And then priority locations would be potentially stretches, for instance, of Antelope Road from Garden Gate to Loppy. We know we've already come through there in recent years and corrected any of the deficiencies within the sidewalks, done all the sidewalk infill, and there's continuous ADA and pedestrian accommodations. Same thing for Dewey Drive from Greenback Lane to Connemara Circle. Sac County and Citrus Heights share a portion, as you had seen in that map from Casey's presentation. We do have a split through there down the center line. So they've recently done some improvements to their side of the road. We would consider doing some on our side of the road as well. And Fair Oaks from Greenback to Madison, that one in Madison Avenue on this sheet are asterisk just because those are shared roadways. We would be looking to collaborate with Sacramento County on these types of projects and share in that cost. Greenback Lane from Birdcage to Dewey, a large part of that segment has not had any pavement applications since incorporation or shortly thereafter. We actually had partnered with county back in 2000 when the widening was done out here between San Juan and Dewey, and we have not done anything since except for minor striping of the lanes. And then Sunrise Boulevard from Sun Garden to Madison Avenue. We have done some improvements along that corridor to install sidewalk infill. We just recently did it a couple of years ago on the southbound side or west side of Sunrise. So we'll be looking for opportunities to address the pavement out there, but taking into consideration any potential movement over at the Sunrise Mall area that we would work in tandem with that development. And then lastly, we would look to strategize our residential streets by districts or grouped neighborhoods and focus on preventative maintenance rather than the lowest PCI again. Currently, under the existing scenarios, because we focus just on the lowest PCI, those streets are all over the community. And in doing so, it takes a lot more strategizing, a lot more coordination with utilities, your increased cost for mobilization and traffic control from the contractors. So by strategizing within the districts, we can coordinate better with the utility companies, ensuring that we're delivering a better product to our community, trying to avoid any conflicts later on. A lot of times what we're finding is when we send out our utility letters to the utility companies advising we're going to do work, they'll let us know if they have anything immediately, but they might have something 3 or 4 years out, and then they come and they tell us, hey, we have to cut your new pavement. So the whole goal is to try to avoid a lot of those different scenarios. From that strategized approach, we would be looking at, again, 50% on arterials, and we would like for that to include collectors, and the other 50% residential, but as preventative maintenance within those residential. So looking at those streets that are 50 PCI or greater, so they're in that fair, not hitting that poor condition yet, and keeping them in that poor, or excuse me, that fair to good to very good category. The reason is once you hit that 50 or lower, your replacement and repair costs are a lot more than if you just do the preventative maintenance, doing some of those base repairs and doing what we call a micro seal or a slurry versus a 2 or a 3 inch overlay. So under the current network PCI, again, at that top right pie, that shows you what the existing is. The caveat to this is the PCI will still continue to degrade because as we've talked about before, we have an extraordinary backlog of unpaved or unmaintained roadways. And so right now we have about an $82 million backlog. That would get us up to an average of 70 PCI throughout the community. Obviously, we don't have those funds to do that. And so by splitting about 3.6 million towards our arterials and collectors, we'll still address those fair streets, but those poor to very poor will continue to degrade. That's why we would still be looking at somewhere around a 43 PCI by 27-28 if we were to do this as a 5-year model. We just do the PCI based approach. And these numbers are actually not as favorable as when they were reported a couple of years ago, just because the unit pricing of construction has gone up exponentially. So our buying power has decreased. So instead of maybe dropping to about a 35 by 27, 28, we're looking at about a 28 average PCI throughout the community. And then you can see that our poor goes from about a 10.9% now to a 60% throughout the community. And that's because those poor category streets, that 25 to 50, will continue to degrade into that very poor failed category. Again, the recap of the recommendations is to kind of shift what we've been doing this whole time that hasn't really been working favorably for us, try to address a lot of these arterials. And I know in the past we've said, well, we would like to reserve our funds and just focus on the residentials, and then we can go and leverage money or some of our local money for grants. But the problem with that is it's taking us a lot longer because grants are only coming so frequent, about every couple of years, and those pots that are available, we're already prioritizing those on some other local, some other arterials such as Auburn Boulevard. We've got funding for San Juan. We're focusing right now also on Old Auburn. And so we want to make sure we're not, discounting other arterials throughout the community that need our attention as well. So we would strategize by programming a minimum of 50% of those anticipated funds over the next 5 years to address our arterials and collectors. We would strategize the program for streets by districts or neighborhoods to improve coordination with our stakeholders, maximize available funds that we do have and that we are anticipating over the next 5 years, and then capitalize on the ability to address other non-pavement maintenance related work. So while we're out there, we can address some of the other striping that we'll be talking about next month. We can swap out some of our street signs that we have. That program was done about 20 years ago, and we're seeing a lot of our signs that are faded. And then focus our efforts within the neighborhoods to increase safety around the schools, areas serving higher traffic, bicycle and pedestrian use, and those streets with fair existing pavement conditions versus waiting until they hit that rock bottom, or that we just have to address them at a ag base or a road based material. That's the end of my presentation. If you have any questions, I'm here. If not, I also have my city engineer, my subject matter expert, can come up here as well.
Any public comment? Okay, Steve, then Jeannie.
Thank you. We all know on this November ballot is the Citizens Initiative. Is that labeled Measure A now? Something like that. I know if it passes, and that's a big if, it would be a 0.5 cent sales tax increase. What would it mean to us as far as revenues in this? I think it's a fix it first. There's
a fix it first, and there's a capital component to it as well.
So we could use it for
Correct.
maintenance as well.
Correct.
And that's a little different than the past, so.
We currently have our Measure A maintenance, and the program before, when it was Measure B, was the same. We did have a maintenance component and ongoing operations component and a capital component as well.
You have, well, we don't need to talk about this till after the election. Then we'll know.
Trying not to talk about this since it's not really something that we've brought up in the past.
Bird in the hand. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Regina, for your presentation. Very, very clear and helpful. So since we're focusing mainly on the 50% area, give or take, okay? If we're doing this by, what's the term you use? By region?
By districts or neighborhood associations?
Districts or neighborhoods. So if you identify a particular neighborhood, and they have within that neighborhood streets that fall within any one of those 4 categories, would it make sense just to fix them all while you're there, rather than just focus on picking out the ones that fall within the fair to poor?
If the funding supports it, we will do as many streets as we can. But in many of the situations, if we look at the map, for instance, up in Area 1, when I showed there was a lot of red, and that Area 1 has a lot of streets, it's very dense. So our funding would not be able to support doing all of those streets if we still reserve 50% for an arterial or collector. And let me caveat that by putting money towards our arterial collectors doesn't necessarily mean it'll just be in a district, because we know we may need 1 or 2 years worth of funding to address some of our arterials at any given time. So that other 50%, we would concentrate it within that district, but we would be able to maximize those funds, looking to see what the best application would be. It might be we can get a lot more streets done with micro sealing if they're at 50% or 50 PCI range, or 60. And if they're around schools, or if they happen to be close to the grocery stores where people are using those streets.
I just guess I don't want to envision seeing patchwork done within within a district or within a neighborhood where one street is fixed and the next one's not, and then another one, then the next one's not. I just would envision that if you're gonna tackle it from a neighborhood position, that you'd fix that neighborhood.
To the greatest extent possible.
Okay. And then my other question is, what happens to those poor streets that are already in the failed position and are going to get worse? You know, at some point, we're going to have to address that and maybe move away from this strategy, or we're going to have, you know, potential very dangerous streets for people to drive on or bicycle on or whatever.
Fortunately, that's the case. So if we don't do something to address some of these streets that are not already in that poor condition, those streets will continue to get poor and continue to fail and be more cost prohibitive to resurface.
Right.
Versus if we put.
I get that.
Yeah.
But it still leaves those streets that are in that horrible condition today that are only going to get worse. And so perhaps it would be prudent to have some type of a back pocket plan for those that really need to be addressed on an individual basis. And I think back several years ago, there was a street off of Old Auburn Road. What is it? I can't think of the name of this, the feeder street. There were, at the end of that feeder street, there was a cul-de-sac that was just horrible. I mean, and so the residents, a couple of residents approached me and we actually just were able to resurface that cul-de-sac, which made it, because it was so dangerous. I mean, to bring it up to a point where it was good and could fill in or fit in with the rest of the neighborhood. And so I'm just thinking there may be some that we just can't ignore.
Correct. And we would like to be able to maintain some flexibility with this program as well.
Question. So, Regina, when we talk about micro sealing, when we talk about sort of maintaining the higher end streets, how long are we sort of, excuse it, how long are we kicking the can down the road? When we're saying, okay, we can micro seal this one, it's going to save us another 3 years, another 5 years, another.
It depends.
Yeah, at some points, the question is, there has to be some kind of methodology that says, all right, well, we're going to maintain this one and we're going to keep it at above 50, but how long can we keep it above 50? And how can we on an average, so we know that, hey, push is going to come to shove at some point, and how long are we buying? How much time are we buying by sort of covering this minimal sort of approach?
The answer is it depends. Depends on the street. It depends on the amount of traffic that street gets. It depends on any other activity that happens on that street, such as if you have utilities that come in and do trench cuts and could potentially compromise that asphalt. Depends on if the street already has drainage, proper drainage to address the water that flows. But best management practices is to not let your streets get below 60, and then you can continue doing slurry seals and micro seals and crack seals before you have to eventually come through and do any type of an FDR, a full depth replacement, a 2-inch or a 3-inch overlay. So as long as you're staying on top of it and you have the sufficient funds to be able to keep your streets out of that poor range category, you can continue it. And it's not about kicking the bucket. It's about maximizing your available funding and not letting your streets get so bad to where it's costing you, instead of $15 per yard, it's costing you $68 per yard for a full depth replacement or a full overlay.
Quick. So I see good and bad at this. I see some concerns that Jeannie really touched on. Man, we're going to get some phone calls, I think, along the way. But it's just kind of funny because it was just yesterday, I'm driving around going like, why did we pick this part? And then this part's bad. And then this part's good. And then this part's bad. And it's like a little patchwork kind of a thing. And it's frustrating to see that. So my solution is you cut the city into 4 pieces and we do all the roads within each quadrant once every 4 years. Simple. Yeah. But I think it's a good idea probably because it is, I think, for me, it's a better approach to stay in a neighborhood and get it all cleaned up as much as we can with what we have. and then to move to the next neighborhood. So I'm supporting it, but I think it is going to obviously, it's going to upset some people along the way of, why can't I get my road fixed? Why are they fixing it over there? That councilman must live over there. They're fixing his roads or something. But I think it's a good idea. I don't know if there's ever any discussion about, I just, again, I don't understand paving roads and cost and stuff, but I just would love to see this kind of operation in-house instead of contracted out to see if we could somehow contain costs. But I know these machines are just crazy expensive too. But we're at the whim of the market as we continue to have to contract out our needs, our street needs and stuff like that. And so I don't know if that ever comes into the conversation, but and again, I certainly have no way of understanding that. And you're over there laughing at me. You're trying hard not to, I can tell. So I would just love to see this in-house so that we could somehow have some better control of it, even if we coordinated that with other jurisdictions like Folsom or whatever. But I think we're on the right path here. We're just going to take some heat for it, and we've got to look at, I think, the bigger picture. And I think this does a good thing towards that.
And I just want to kind of point out, we're talking about a minimum of 50% of the anticipated funds to go to what you have outlined here, right? That means we still have an additional 50% to address the poor quality roads. I do think that's probably our best option here is to kind of, like you said, keep our good roads as good as possible and take that rest of that funding and really pound into those really poor roads.
But isn't the rest of the funding for arterials?
It would be 50% for arterials and collectors,
Right.
and the other 50% for the residential streets.
Right.
If I might be able to add in here too, one of the things that looking at this is it's very expensive to pave a court, and you've got a lot of driveway conflicts. There's a lot of coordination, and you can do a lot when you're on a collector or an arterial where you don't have as many conflicts. So while there's a lot of discussion about pavement index and things of that nature, I think in general, what this approach is looking at doing, especially as we're starting to talk about bringing some additional general fund revenue that currently is not there, to address pavement infrastructure, is to take some of that money and go towards these collectors and arterials that we hear a lot about. I mean, I think a lot of our residents have expressed that they're experiencing the collectors and arterials from a vehicle miles that they travel, and they get beat up on a cheese grater versus when they get in their neighborhood. If you've got some alligator cracking, sure, you'd like to see that addressed, but you're probably spending more time on those collectors and arterials. So right now, the way our current program works is the focus goes into those courts because we're using this pavement index. Whereas under this new program, we're not abandoning that, but we're also directing dollars to streets that people experience more and spend more time on, and making sure those don't continue to degrade too. It's really trying to take a balanced approach.
Hard,
Hey there.
hard subject.
I had a quick question. You mentioned micro seal. Is that like chip seal that
Microseal, it's an emulsion. It's like a clear nail polish. So you go through and you do of your base repairs, get rid of any base failures that you have, do a hot mix replacement over that to seal it, but then you do a clear over everything else, all the other pavement that's still in good condition.
Okay.
We've
Because that's
done-
what I remember growing up is all the streets got chip sealed by the county. And then that was the first thing to be cut. The next thing that was cut is courts. And so I think we need to keep an eye on that. If it's down in the 20% TCI and we're doing that neighborhood, I think we shouldn't have a policy of no courts. But if it's up at 75, like my court is, I pave Mariposa, please.
We've done historically, we have done some chip seals. We have done some slurry seals in the past, early on in incorporation, and micro seals, crack seals, all different types of approaches.
Anything to keep the water from getting underneath and making potholes.
Do you have adequate direction?
I think so. And so the intent is that staff will now continue coordination with the utility companies to better strategize, to see where their projects are over the next 5 years. And then we can go through and identify where are the high priorities for us in terms of the feedback that we've received from the community, some of the high priorities that we're already aware of, and then we will come back to council with more of a long-term plan.
For your presentation and your patience.
Your intelligent approach to this. A lot of thought.
Thank you.
Okay. Next item.
Next item is regular calendar, item number 15. The subject is guideline approval and funding allocation for the Community Projects Grant Program. The recommendation is to adopt a resolution approving the Community Projects Grant Program guidelines and associated American Rescue Plan Act funding allocation.
Would you like to drive at this point, Amy? I know when to call it. Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and Council. I am Megan Huber, Economic Development and Community Engagement Director, bringing before you an item to consider program guidelines and budget allocation for a Community Projects Grant, which is a current strategic goal of the City Council. This goal originated really even before our strategic planning in May of this year. It originated in our focus area work plan, which is the guiding document that was presented and subsequently codified via resolution that provides a longer term work plan to really focus in and provide intensive attention to the areas that are most important to our community, one of which being community connection. And this program was a recommendation presented in that memo as a tool to put in our community engagement toolbox and advance community connection in Citrus Heights. It showed up immediately in our strategic planning grid. And like I said, is a current goal to present to you for consideration a proposal that would provide grants to community groups to facilitate community projects that engage citizens, improve the community, and promote community involvement and pride. So this evening, we will review the program goal and scope, as well as proposed eligibility, what the application process would look like, as well as the review and award process, and finally, the program term and recommended funding. So the program goal for our Community Projects Grant is fourfold. It's meant to increase community connection by first inspiring creative and innovative thinking. And I have some really great community data to share with you on that point. Second, to connect residents through events and programs. I think we all collectively agree that one of the highest, the most frequent requests that we hear from community are chances to connect via events. Third, we would use this program to reach local grassroots groups looking to do something positive in their community to build on our community engagement goals. And finally, fourth, to strengthen existing and create new partnerships to improve Citrus Heights' quality of life. And really, that underscores that community engagement, it does not happen in a vacuum. It's not something a city organization can do by itself. It really takes connecting and weaving that community fabric with all of our community champions to make an effective program. So for this program, we intentionally designed guidelines to be as wide as possible so that we have a better understanding of needs out in the Citrus Heights community, how this program could potentially help, and really invite new folks to the table to engage with Citrus Heights. So this program would be open to any 501c3 community group or organization that's seeking funding to complete an activity or project that improves the quality of life and community connection in Citrus Heights. Now, while I did not say individuals are eligible, that is for prudent reasons. Because we're casting such a wide net for proposed projects and programs, we so easily get into territory of insurance requirements and permits and similar. So we'd like to start out by receiving applications from community groups. However, that does not mean our residents cannot or will not be involved. What we see is an opportunity to build a program that can be stewarded by our neighborhood association network and provide a new way for them to provide value to residents to engage. So we'll be heavily involving our neighborhood associations in the marketing and administration and finding new folks to participate in this community engagement programming.
Actually, an initial question.
Mhm.
So, we currently have a grant program for neighborhood associations to apply and receive funding for a project.
Yeah.
So with this is outside of that, I take it.
Correct.
So is potentially or theoretically, a neighborhood association could apply for a neighborhood association grant and they could apply for this?
It's possible as long as it's within the guidelines.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm. So as I mentioned, we work to design these guidelines to cast as wide a net as possible and found that some of the most effective programs don't define what's eligible because we can inadvertently box ourselves in. Some of the most effective programs set parameters around what's not eligible, which allows us to continue to imagine and ideate. So the program will not consider grant proposals for pretty frankly standard things like retroactive funding or salaries or replacement of funding for pre-existing programs. The duration of the list is on the screen as well as included in the guidelines. And what we really hope to do with these wide open guidelines and casting as wide a net as possible is to create community engagement programming that leverages Citrus Heights' uniquely solid roots to create new growth that looks like exponentially more of this. So our hope is that we can effectively market this program and partner with community champions to create community fabric that it includes new community cleanups, music and concerts, maybe in the park, placemaking and public art opportunities, pop-up events, neighborhood block parties, and more. And we're excited to see what ideas other folks can bring to the table as we imagine together. I mentioned having really compelling community data, and this community data came from our recently executed flash vote that Vice Mayor Schaefer referenced earlier this evening. One of the goal of the flash vote overall was to do a check-in with our community that's currently signed up for a flash vote to measure how the city is doing on strategic planning execution, specifically around goals in community image and community connection. So the particular question that I'm presenting here asks, the City of Citrus Heights has a strategic goal to increase community connection and will be deploying a community block party trailer available for residents to rent, free to host community events. What other ideas do you have for little things, maybe $1,000 to $5,000 that the city could do to help increase community connection or improve community image? And this question had over 100 responses of the total of almost 400 people who responded. And you can see a great depth and breadth of ideas and frankly, community needs and desires that they would like to see implemented. So this list could guide us when we work to implement marketing of showing community champions who would like to apply the types of programs and events that our community is interested in. You can see it ranges widely, everything from ice cream socials to neighborhood outreach programs, holiday decorations contests, a community caroling event. I had quite a few favorites that I found in this list myself. And I included two sentiments that were write-ins on this survey that I thought really spoke to the spirit of this program. One person said that the best way that we could increase community connection is to encourage citizens to get creative when it comes to identifying and addressing local issues. And another resident shared, the more we can involve the community, the better our city becomes. So this program is an opportunity to invite our residents to the table to create community together. So the proposed program launch, it'll involve a 45-day online application period. And that's a distinction from a standard first come, first serve grant program, in that we want to ensure that we're informing and fully saturating knowledge of this program for our residents and community organizations, because it will be new. And we also want to ensure equity of access to the potential funds, as well as consider all potential options together. We commit to doing really big marketing. This is the second community engagement program in our community engagement initiative, and we want to make sure everyone knows about it. Marketing will happen well in advance of application launch and through the application period. And of course, we commit to direct outreach to every applicable community group. Our goal is to create inspirational marketing materials. We find oftentimes with these styles of programs, it's not that folks don't have a will, it's that we just don't have an idea yet. So our goal will be to create marketing that helps folks ideate and put a finger on what they desire to see in their community. And then we're committed to providing staff support to vet project ideas and to complete applications. So the application components will be fairly simple. Again, our goal is to make this as simple as possible. It will review the project or program goal, the expected community involvement, an action plan, any maintenance to consider. We'd want to be able to quantify the significance of the potential application, the budget, and then we'd also ask for 2 letters of support to ensure that there is the community engagement ecosystem there. And that there is support for community members who are wanting to tackle new projects. The application review criteria, which will happen first step after the period closes by staff. We would review if the proposed project can be completed within the requested amount, and if there's any applicable other contributions if it is a larger lift of a project. We would do an analysis on if the proposed use of funds has a reasonable likelihood that it will benefit the community and create community connection. There will be a requirement that it be completed in a calendar year. The intention is to create access to seed funding for grassroots, short-term, readily implementable projects. And of course, all projects must take place within the city of Citrus Heights, but we have to write it down for posterity. And we are prioritizing activities and projects that are free to participants and open to the public to ensure true community engagement. So a quick summary of the review and award process. Staff will review applications for completeness and eligibility, and that'll happen within 45 days of the application period closing. We'll vet those and then present to City Council Finance Committee for review and recommendation. This process mirrors what we currently do for our community support program. And then the Finance Committee recommendations will be presented to City Council for final approval. Once projects, programs, or events are approved, staff will prepare an approval letter for the project that confirms everything the applicant needs to know, including the eligible use of the funds, any permits or insurance that it's decided that particular project is needed, depending on what it looks like. And then it'll review the reimbursement process as well. And then the applicant will implement their project and submit for reimbursement. I will note that there is language in the guidelines that says alternative accommodations may be arranged alternative to reimbursement, depending on the project's scope. So if it's shorter term, if it's one shot rather than a longer planning process and similar, our goal would be to approach every project individually and really design a project fingerprint that works best for them, because we want to see things implemented.
So for program term and funding, staff proposes that we launch the pilot round, if approved, in first quarter of 2023. We recommend a $50,000 allocation of American Rescue Plan Act funding for the pilot round. And the word pilot is intentional. We're seeing this first round will serve as demand data. So we have a better understanding of market needs, the desires that are out there, and that can inform future rounds. We're also really interested in this pilot round because it will allow us to start building even stronger relationships with interested parties. So the program life, our intention is to steward it through the lifetime of American Rescue Plan Act funds, as long as the program is adequately subscribed. So we'll take it in biannual rounds, and as long as there's sufficient demand, do our best to make it happen. The $50,000 allocation is recommended via American Rescue Plan Act funding and past the strategic goals that council has set. This is also a reiteration of the guiding principle that you've given staff on ARPA funding stewardship to work to get those dollars out into the community, make measurable progress towards our collective community goals. So with that, this is the recommendation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
What's our pot of gold? How much do we have in the ARPA fund to work from?
Let me look that up for you real quick. The total allocation remaining of ARPA funding is $8,090,281.
Okay. That could happen for a long time.
And then as a reminder, the ARPA guidelines stipulate that funds must be allocated by December of 2024 and expended by December of 2026. So our goal would be to synchronize these rounds to make sure we're maximizing from a timing perspective.
Right. So I can't imagine, given the parameters of $1,000 to $5,000 per project, that we would be able to do that for the whole 8 million. So I'm imagining we're not anticipating, but we have other plans for that money as well. See, there are city managers enthusiastically nodding,
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember Bruins. This really is solely for this program, $50,000. We're recommending an allocation out of ARPA, but consistent with the strategic plan, there's a number of other forthcoming programs over the goal period, the 3-year goal period, that are tied to that focus area work plan, where we'll be coming back in with other ARPA allocation recommendations separate and a part of this program.
Okay. Thank you for that. I figured there were other plans, because really, in reality, it's a very short time frame. This is 2022. So we've got 23, we got to allocate by the end of 24 and implement by the end of 25.
26.
Or 26. Okay. Excuse me. I misunderstood. Oh, that gives us 1 extra year, but still, it's got to be done sooner rather than later, or the time limit will catch up with us and they won't be qualified. We'll have to use the funds for something else to get it done within the time frame.
Okay, I have one public comment.
Okay.
Mike Nishimura, if you would come up here, please. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. My name is Mike Nishimura. I am the president of REACH, which is the Residents Empowerment Association of Citrus Heights. With the meeting restrictions, public meeting restrictions that were created by the COVID outbreak, 3 of our neighborhood associations have gone dark, not unable to have meetings. There is no longer any participation in those neighborhood associations. There are other neighborhood associations that are struggling to regain the membership back. Now, we, the REACH Board, believe that this new grant proposal, along with the community block party trailer, can be leveraged to help our neighborhood associations rebuild our outreach within the Citrus Heights community and help promote City Manager Feeney's strategic planning objective to enhance community vibrancy and engagement. As it would not affect our neighborhood improvement funds, and it is being funded by the ARPA funds, it could further help us to engage citizens in the community and to help community, to promote community involvement and pride, trying to build back that sense of pride that the people have in our city. So the Reach Board fully supports this, in addition to the block party trailer, which has already been approved. Thank you.
Okay, back to our robust discussion.
And Jeannie, I wanted to make a quick point, Councilmember Bruins. The parameters set in the flash vote question of $1,000 to $5,000, that was editorial to help frame up that grassroots picture.
And you know, that was my favorite page in your PowerPoint.
I'm so glad.
I thought there was just some really cool ideas coming from our community. So
Me too.
I took the flash survey. So it was, those are always fun in and of themselves, but to see how many people actually responded and what their ideas were, I think that helps feed the, that's fodder for us to really create something great out of this. Thank you.
And I know we had this issue with the neighborhood improvement funds, was pretty soon we ran out of places to improve and we drifted into parks and schools and doing some of the things that they should be doing already, the organization. So I was wondering if there was any encumbrance on doing projects on a school property or park property.
No encumbrance. In fact, in the guidelines, it does note that preference is given to public space, especially when it comes to hosting events, to ensure we're reaching those community engagement goals of open to the public and easily accessible.
It's awesome. Thank you.
Oh, if I could, I think one of the issues that we have with neighborhood improvement projects is there are very tight guidelines. It has to be something physical. What I like about this program is you could fund a music in the park event. You could, it doesn't all have to be a completely tangible thing. It's not a park bench. It's not a, so I think from that standpoint, this will sort of gravitate away from those ideas where people are going to want to spend money with the park district, and the park district has their own strategy on how to optimize that piece. So, I think this is great. And I mentioned before that that I think the flash vote results were really impressive. And I concur with Councilmember Bruins in that some really thoughtful responses were really made there. So kudos to you. Thank you.
And if I can put a quick plug for folks watching, if you'd like to be a part of our flash vote next time around, please visit citrusheights.net/stay connected.
Daniels, anything?
It's a great idea. I think we hopefully can throw more money into this, and that Citrus Heights will just be a partying kind of town. And we bring back the cruise, and the mall's great, and it's wonderful.
With that, I will entertain a motion. Mike?
Oh, so sorry. Got to go back to our correct page. So back to, thank you. I move that we approve a resolution of the City Council of the City of Citrus Heights approving the Community Projects Grant Program Guidelines and associated American Rescue Plan Act funding allocation of $50,000.
I second.
Motion by Bruin, second by Vice Mayor Schaefer. All those in favor?
Aye.
So moved.
Thank you.
Next item, please.
The next item is department reports, and there are none. The next item is city manager items.
That's you, Ash.
Yeah.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the council, Ash Feeney, your city manager. Good evening, community. A few updates for you tonight. I do have some slides. One, before we go into the slides here, I want to just mention that I did meet this week with the new principal at San Juan High School, Mr. David Levis. Had a great meeting, talked about some areas of opportunity where we could kind of jointly serve our student population at San Juan. He had some great ideas, shared some ideas that we had. We had the San Juan basketball team in here. That was a great night with the packed house, and we honored their achievement with their great record last year. But there's a variety of ideas that came out of that meeting. So I just wanted to acknowledge that and let the council know about that and let the community. So looking forward to talking about some of those in greater depth with you. If we can go to the slides. Sunday Fun Day. We talked a lot about this earlier at the council comments, but I never hurts to get the word out again. 11 a.m. We're going to be having welcoming comments. We're going to have a ceremonial tree planting in honor of the 25-year anniversary. That'll be done with the city council. And then we're also going to be having, of course, our Citrus Heights marching band will be at the early part of the event. We are going to have canine demos from our police department at 12 and 1:15, as well as other police department activity. And then starting at 12:30, we'll have our opener, Austin Moe, who will have some great rock and blues. And then later on, we'll have our headliner, Keenan Smith, who is a country artist. And so I've got a little bit of a mix there for the community. And then again, we've got the K9 demos on here, but they're only happening at 12 p.m. and 1:15. One thing to note, SAC RT is offering free rides to the event, and we are going to have a shuttle throughout the event that will run from City Hall, our campus here, back and forth to Rush Park. So there's going to be some parking available at the event, but you can make it nice and easy on yourself and come over here to our campus and park, and then have a shuttle back and forth. Go to the next slide, please. Still in celebration of the 25th anniversary. It was great hearing Bill and Melissa's, or I'm sorry, Bill and Melinda's presentation, Miranda, excuse me, Bill and Miranda's presentation earlier this evening, Bill Van Duker, Miranda Culp's presentation. So make sure I get that on the incorporation book that's being released. And so in that same vein, celebrating the 25th anniversary of incorporation, we have a Capitol Pops concert that's going to be occurring here at the City Hall campus. That's on October 22nd from 2 to 4 p.m. They'll have a performance. It's also their 25th anniversary as well. So it's kind of a joint celebration. So something to look forward to, and that's a Saturday. Jurisdictional coordination. This was touched on by Councilmember Daniels as part of council comments, and also Councilmember Bruins, you spoke to it when we had our earlier public comment. But coming out of the strategic planning retreat that was held at City Council, there was a lot of focus when we were talking about blight and homelessness on jurisdictional coordination. Certainly, we have our boundaries, which are not just greenfield. We are in an area of a lot of development. And so we have some edges that require coordination with the county. And then we also have the interchange at Antelope and I-80 that has been a real problem relative to a lot of debris and litter and encampments and things of that nature at that location. And so we've done a good effort working with Caltrans. I've had some conversations with the district director about the vision that our team and the city council have for jurisdictional cooperation. It was a very positive conversation. We had areas of focus and collaboration that we were in agreement on. We shared that with our respective teams, and they've been executing. I want to really hand it to Regina Cave, our General Services Director, as well as our Police Chief, Alex Turcott, who took this and ran with it and had been working with the regional managers in the area to get some action out there and talk about a vision where we'd have more collaboration and coordination when we do cleanup efforts. And so that, that paid dividends this week. I've got a few pictures here, but the Caltrans crews addressed the interchange. They also addressed areas along the frontage behind the car wash behind Cal Burrito. So that whole area was cleaned up. And here's some pictures of our partners in action. So we had our own team meet out there, as well as several crews from Caltrans that came out, as well as CHP. You can see in the photos here, rain or shine, they were out there. If we can go to the next slide. And you can kind of see some before and after photos here on the left. There was still quite a bit of debris down coming onto the on-ramp at Antelope going westbound. And you can kind of see that cleaned up in the other picture. And if we can go to the next slide. It's another before and after. There's actually some carved in steps, at the interchange and a lot of debris at that location. And so that was cleaned up, and you can see that they've tried to, redo some of that grading out there from a stormwater standpoint. We can go to the next slide. And again, additional cleanup, as you can see here. I believe that concludes those jurisdictions. Oh, one more. So we had more to clean up. And again, this is along the frontage here. So some before and afters up behind California Burrito there. So it was a significant cleanup. It took a lot of work. There's a lot of hands on deck on this one. And I just really appreciate our team that was working on this. And there was not just Regina and the chief, but there was other team members that were involved with this as well on both sides of PD and GSD. And then also, I just want to really hand it to our jurisdictional partners at Caltrans. They were very responsive. And the good news is it wasn't a one-time pony here. We're talking about having better coordination in the future. Will additional camps pop up? Sure, they will. But if we're coordinated in our efforts, we can do a better job on how we manage that to ensure we don't get to a state like this again. So if we can go to the next slide. More good news. The team's been very busy. This is all since the last city council meeting. There's been 3 grant applications that have been submitted. These are through our community development department that Casey leads. And one of them is for a community care expansion program, the Auburn Oaks Senior Project that was before the city council, where you supported the resolution to work with the Life Foundation on sponsoring this grant to acquire that site. And then a application was submitted for Sunrise Tomorrow infrastructure support through the Green Means Go program that would look at potential financing plans for the infrastructure there. And then finally, Sayonara Drive through Green Means Go. We've also pursuing a grant there to help with the Habitat for Humanity homes that are planned at that location. And that concludes my comments.
Thank you. Next item.
Next item is items requested by council members or future agenda items.
Nothing? All right, we're adjourned.